You know, there are some companies in Silicon Valley that just spark a ton of fascination and maybe a little paranoia. Palantir is definitely one of them. It's a name you've probably heard, right? Usually mentioned alongside the Pentagon, spy agencies, and some pretty controversial government contracts. But what does this company actually do? Okay, let's dive in and try to demystify one of tech's most powerful and secretive players.
A great place to start is this quote from their CEO, Alex Karp. He says they're in the business of the finding of hidden things. Now, that sounds like something straight out of a spy movie, and, well, that's not entirely an accident. But the hidden things they're looking for might not be what you expect.
The name itself, Palantir, it actually comes from the Lord of the Rings. In the story, it's a magical stone that lets you see events happening far, far away. But here's the catch. The stones can also be used for evil. And the company will tell you that choice was totally on purpose. It's like a built-in warning about the sheer power of the technology they're creating.
All right, so here's how we're going to break this down. First, we'll get into their core technology. Then, we'll look at two of its most high-stakes uses, their work with the military and with U.S. immigration enforcement. And finally, we'll dig into the philosophy that drives the whole company and the bigger trend it represents in Silicon Valley.
So what are these hidden things Palantir is finding? Well, it's not about hacking into new systems or anything like that. It's actually about solving a problem that honestly plagues just about every massive organization on the planet. Data that's stuck in its own little world and doesn't talk to anything else.
Okay, so imagine you're running a huge manufacturing company. You've got one system for product design, a totally separate one for the assembly line, a third for inventory, and a fourth for sales. All that data is locked away in its own silo. The real story, the big picture, is totally lost in the cracks between all those systems. Palantir builds the software that bridges those gaps, connecting all of it so a company can finally see the whole picture. You know, Palantir CTO Shyam Sankar, he puts it pretty bluntly. At its heart, their work is the deeply unglamorous task of data integration. So to make that exciting, they had to wrap it in something cool, right? So they frame it as building Iron Man suits for analysts, giving them the power to connect the dots and make way better decisions, whether they're managing a supply chain or tracking a terrorist.
So this is a really critical point you have to get. The same fundamental technology applies to two totally different worlds. In the business world, you're optimizing the value chain. That's everything from the supplier all the way to the customer. But in the military world, you're optimizing the kill chain. And that's everything from the sensor that finds a target to the shooter who engages it.
Okay, so let's dig into that military side of things. This is where Palantir's work becomes quite literally a matter of life and death. We're talking about helping the U.S. military optimize that kill chain and make faster, more informed decisions when it really counts.
Now, kill chain isn't just some casual phrase they throw around. It's a formal military concept. It's the entire targeting process, step by step. And the whole point of using technology here is pretty simple. You want to get through this process way faster and way smarter than your opponent. In a war, speed wins. In peacetime, speed is what creates deterrence.
All right, let's make this real. This slide breaks down a real-world scenario, the Houthi missile threat, into a data problem. It starts with identifying a potential launcher, maybe with a satellite. But you can't just act on that alone. You have to corroborate it, right? Use other intelligence to make sure it's not just a clever decoy. Then you prioritize. Is this thing an immediate threat? If the answer is yes, you get the legal green light, pick the right weapon, and act. And finally, you assess the damage. Palantir's software is designed to make this whole high-stakes cycle go smoother and faster.
Now, that same logic of connecting data also applies to Palantir's most controversial work here at home, its partnership with U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE. This is where the company faces some of its sharpest criticism.
So the big question is, how exactly is this software being used for immigration enforcement? Well, the answer, and you're probably seeing a pattern here, is all about data integration. Palantir's tools connect information that the Department of Homeland Security already has, but which is scattered across a ton of different, disconnected systems.
So what kind of data are we talking about? Well, it could be stuff like data from encounters at the border, asylum applications, maybe requests for benefits, and addresses people have reported during those interactions. So instead of an agent having to slog through 20 different systems just to find a last known address, boom, the software pulls it all together at once, which can then be used to find people for deportation proceedings.
And this brings us to a really important distinction that Palantir themselves make. They're very clear on this. They say, look, we're not creating new ways to grab data. We're just building tools that help the government use the data it already has the lawful authority to collect more efficiently.
So why does Palantir do this kind of work? What's the driving force? Well, the company was really born from a very specific worldview, one that was forged in the immediate aftermath of 9/11 and is all about serving the West.
You know, right after 9/11, the whole conversation was framed as this trade-off. You can have privacy or you can have security. Pick one. But Palantir's founders, they looked at that and said, no, that's a false choice. They believed that as engineers, they could actually build technology that delivered more of both, strengthening our institutions while also protecting civil liberties.
And according to their CTO, the answer to worrying about government overreach isn't to hope your government is bad at its job. No, the answer is to make them really effective, but at the same time, build really powerful tools for oversight to watch the watchers and make sure there are no abuses.
And this right here, this is the heart of the whole debate. On one hand, you have critics who are terrified of making the government this efficient. They might even say a little bit of institutional incompetence is a good thing, a safeguard. But Palantir's argument is the total opposite, that incompetence is the real threat, because it stops our institutions from doing the job they're supposed to do.
Okay, last thing. Palantir isn't just about one company. It's really a symbol of this huge tectonic shift happening in the relationship between Silicon Valley and Washington, D.C., a move from a globalist mindset to a newly patriotic one. For the longest time, the vibe in tech was super post-nationalist, we're citizens of the world. But then things started to change. The invasion of Ukraine was this massive wake-up call for a lot of people, a realization that hard power still matters. And now it's gotten to the point where you have top execs from places like Meta and OpenAI actually getting commissioned as officers in the U.S. Army Reserve. I mean, just think about that shift.
Sankar has this great word for this new generation of defense-focused tech companies: heretics. They see themselves as shaking things up, challenging the old guard, the traditional defense industry, which they'd argue has gotten slow and lost its innovative spark. These heretics believe they're the ones re-injecting the innovation that's absolutely essential for national security.
Which leaves us with this final, massive question. Is this fusion of Silicon Valley and the military, is it an absolutely essential partnership for protecting the West in a world that feels more dangerous by the day? Or are we just building a more powerful, more efficient, and maybe more intrusive surveillance state, bit by bit? That's really the debate at the core of what Palantir sees.